I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Thank you, Mr. President. The American representative said that Russia spends resources to support what she called the Syrian regime. My question to her: what about the United States? The United States is spending its resources in Syria on what? To provide food and milk to Syrian children, or to provide armed groups with weapons, armed groups that have committed the most heinous crimes against the Syrian people? Or is it spending resources on your planes and fighter jets that have been so active in Syria? My American colleague has been threatening my country in most Security Council sessions. Does she acknowledge then that her administration does not give this Security Council any weight? It does not respect the principles of international law or the United Nations as a whole? Let's test the credibility of what she presented. And note that I'm not referring to the American administration as the American regime, because it's shameful. We cannot do this in the United Nations. So let's test the credibility of what she's presented. She said this Security Council must act to achieve justice in Syria. Okay then. My test is: her administration should allow the disclosure of the results of the UNSCOM. They investigated the presence of WMDs in Iraq for 18 years. This commission was headed by a Swede, Hans Blix. And as you know, this commission didn't find anything after 18 years of investigation or examination. They didn't find any chemical weapons. They didn't find Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola. Nevertheless, in 2008, towards the end of 2008, the Security Council, in a closed meeting, decided to end the work of this commission and bury the archives of this commission in iron boxes. And only the Secretary General knows how to open these boxes. He's the only one who has the locks. There was one condition: these boxes can only be opened after 60 years. What is so shameful in this archives? Why did we need to bury them in boxes that cannot be opened in 60 years? Mr. President, the government of the Syrian Arab Republic condemns in the strongest terms the ruthless Israeli aggression that took place this morning on T4 airport in Homs Governorate, killing and injuring a number of civilians. This aggression is a flagrant violation of Security Council Resolution 350 of 1974 and Security Council resolutions on counterterrorism. This aggression would not have occurred were it not for the unlimited and consistent support by the American administration to Israel. The American administration guarantees immunity so that Israel is not held accountable. This allows Israel to continue to practice state terrorism and threaten peace and security in the region and in the world. Of course, Western countries did not refer even to the Israeli aggression in their statements. That means that they are complicit and they support this aggression. Unfortunately, my dear friend de Mistura did not listen to Netanyahu saying this morning that it is Israel that launched this aggression. This is why I was surprised when he said that the United Nations is not able to verify the identity of the perpetrators of this aggression. Well, Netanyahu himself, Mr. Mistura, is saying and that he launched this aggression. Why didn't you refer to Israel? Why didn't you explicitly say Israel is to blame for this aggression? This Israeli aggression is an indirect response to the successes of the Syrian Arab army. The army succeeded in expelling armed terrorist groups from the suburbs of Damascus, rural Damascus, and other Syrian territory. Those groups have been shelling the Syrian people, kidnapping civilians, detaining them, using them as human shields. Damascus alone was targeted by 3,000 missiles within 3 months, killing 155 and injuring 865 civilians, most of them women and children. The Syrian government stresses that the repeated Israeli aggressions did not and will not protect Israeli agents from terrorist groups. They also will not and did not divert the attention of the Syrian Arab army from the decisive military victory over terrorists. Mr. President, the American anti-racism activist Martin Luther King said, and I quote, "A lie is like a snowball. The further you roll it, the bigger it becomes." End of quote. It seems that this wise saying holds true at any time and at any place. The governments of some countries are lying incessantly. Fortunately, though, they're not quite perfecting the details of their web of lies. Just as the famous character of Baron Münchhausen in German literature. Mr. President, some permanent members have become professional liars, and this in itself is a weapon of mass destruction. Through lying, Israel was occupied. Through Palestine was occupied. Through lying, they fueled the war in the Korean Peninsula. Through lying, they invaded Vietnam. Through lying, they invaded Grenada. Through lying, they occupied Iraq. Through lying, they destroyed Libya. Through lying, that they established Takfiri terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda, Taliban, ISIS, Al-Nusra Front, Jaish al-Islam, and the list goes on. And through lying, these countries are trying to defeat Syria and prepare the ground for an aggression. It is worthy to note that the statement, the negative statement of the US representative is in contradiction with a statement made by General Matthews, Defense Secretary. He said in an interview with Newsweek 2 days ago with journalist Ian Winke, this journalist used a title for this interview. I will read it out in English.
Now, Mattis admits there was no evidence President Assad used poison gas on his own people. هذا ليس وزير دفاع سوريا. الإدارة الأمريكية.
This is not the Syrian defense minister, it's the American defense secretary. How coherent is this administration? Mr. President, on the 10th of December 2012, 2012, so 6 years ago, we conveyed a formal letter to the Council with the symbol A/67/628. So before the first time, the operators of terrorist groups claimed that sarin gas was used in Khan al-Asal on March 19, 2013. We informed you that the United States, the United Kingdom, and France have launched a campaign of allegations claiming that the Syrian government might have used chemical weapons. Back then, we warned that such allegations would encourage governments that sponsor terrorism to provide chemical weapons to armed terrorist groups, and then claim that the Syrian government had used those weapons. What happened in the past few years in Khan al-Asal, Al-Ghouta, Kafr Zeta, Latamina, Tel Minnis, and Khan Shaykhun, and other villages and towns in Syria confirms unequivocally that what we had warned of 5 years ago. The United States, the United Kingdom, and France have been so eager to hold one meeting after the other, based on fabricated information. This is part of a deep crisis that we're witnessing, and they want to involve other council members in this crisis. These three countries created in the Security Council since 2013 a big elephant of lies and deceit, and this elephant is living today in this chamber and is stamping with its huge feet on the credibility of this council. It seems that these countries called for holding this session to support terrorists and to obstruct the agreement reached about Douma. However, these countries were a bit late because the terrorists wanted this meeting to be held before they were forced to reach an agreement with the Syrian state to leave their strongholds and hand over their weapons. These countries were late in fulfilling their promises to the terrorists. It would have been better not to repeat this broken record and not to rely on false reports from mercenaries, so-called white helmets, that were established by British intelligence officer James Lomizure. He's British, but his name is French. What proves that these countries were lying is that the residents of Douma left the city safely. 170,000 civilians left the city safely. Those terrorists chose to reach an agreement with the Syrian state as the last resort for them and their families. Buses are transferring them and their families to the city of Jarablus after they refused to settle their affairs and they chose to go to the city of Jarablus. The vast majority of residents chose to stay where they were and to be on the side of the Syrian state. It turns out that allegations of some states, some of the members of this council, on the deteriorating humanitarian situation in eastern Ghouta were lies, just as what we witnessed in Aleppo. As it turned out, that warehouses of terrorist groups were full of medication and food, monopolized by some elements who sold these items to civilians at exorbitant prices. At this point, I have to ask, ladies and gentlemen, did the three countries call to hold this meeting to legitimize the Israeli aggression that occurred this morning, or to impede and obstruct the implementation of the agreement? In this context, I must thank the representative of the Russian Federation that recognized the true nature of what these countries were preparing for. So he called to hold a meeting under the agenda item, Threats to International Peace and Security. This is the correct title. Mr. President, we conveyed to the Security Council, the OPCW, and what used to be called the Joint Investigative Mechanism, 145 letters, the latest on April 1st, 2018. 145 letters. And I thank the permanent representative of Kazakhstan, who noted that you don't read those letters and you don't respond to those letters. Those letters contain accurate information stating that armed terrorist groups, possess toxic chemical substances, notably chlorine and sarin. We warned time and again that those groups are preparing for crimes of use of chemical weapons, and they're working with the white helmets to fabricate evidence, to take pictures of locations and film Hollywood-like scenes, everything staged. All that to blame the Syrian government, to influence public opinion, and to incite against Syria and its allies. This is why these countries called for holding this meeting to create pretexts and justify any military aggression on Syria. It seems, Mr. President, that the directors of this bloody terrorist scene failed to perfect their web of lies. We note that in each of those theatrical scenes on the alleged use of chemical weapons by the Syrian government, we note that these substances never find their way to armed elements. It's always children and women. Chemical weapons that discriminate against armed elements, but they love children and women. These substances only need to be washed away with water in front of the camera. Just water, Water heals everything. Rescue workers never need to wear protective masks. And it seems that the Syrian Arab army only uses those substances that it doesn't possess to begin with, because the Americans destroyed them on the Ray ship in the Mediterranean. So the Syrian Arab army only uses those substances that it doesn't possess in the first place, only when it is making military progress. How strange, how strange. Mr. President, this campaign lacks the minimum standards of credibility. It relies on fabricated information from social media. Armed elements have been fabricated in this information. I announce from this rostrum that Syria is prepared to facilitate a fact-finding mission from the OPCW to the place of incident in Douma as soon as possible to investigate and verify these allegations. We agree with the Russian proposal to listen to the fact-finding mission's report after it visited Raqqa. We welcome this visit as soon as possible. I hope this offer does not face the same fate as our first offer that we presented to the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon after the incident in 2013, in March 2013 in Khan al-Asal. Back then, we asked the Secretary General to provide assistance to the Syrian government so that we're able to investigate what happened in Khan al-Asal immediately. It took the UN 4 months and 11 days. As you recall, Dr. Sillstrom was sent to Syria. It took the UN 4 months and 11 days. That is how the UN interpreted the term immediately. 4 months and 11 days. And when Dr. Sillstrom arrived in Damascus to investigate what happened in Khan al-Asal, some groups claimed that chemical weapons were used in Ghouta. So Dr. Sillstrom moved from Khan al-Asal to al-Ghouta. And just so you know, till now, no investigations have occurred into what happened in Khan al-Asal. Mr. President, today we directly accuse Washington, Paris, London, Riyadh, Al-Doha and Ankara of providing ISIS, Al-Nusra Front, Jais al-Islam Failaq ar-Rahman, and dozens of affiliated terrorist groups with toxic chemical substances to be used against Syrian civilians. We accuse them of starting those massacres, of fabricating evidence to falsely blame the Syrian government of the use of toxic chemical substances to prepare the ground for an aggression against my country, just as the United States and the United Kingdom did in Iraq in 2003. Yes, we say to the United States and the United Kingdom and France that in Syria and Iraq we eliminated the vast majority of ISIS elements within 3 years, not within 30 years, as Mr. Obama has said, within 3 years and not within 30 years, as these countries had planned to justify undermining the stability of the region. Yes, we say to Saudi Arabia today that we eliminated its terrorist tentacles in eastern Ghouta, and I mean Jaish al-Islam gangs. Yes, we say to Qatar and Turkey that we eliminated their terrorist tentacles in eastern Ghouta, and I mean Al-Nusra Front gangs and Failaq ar-Rahman gangs. And I say to all those who exported to us armed, moderate, genetically modified opposition that we eliminated these toxic exports. And we call upon those exporters to bear the consequences of their actions, as some elements who survived would return to their original countries. It is very simple, really. Let me just say that on our borders with Turkey and in the separation zone with in Golan, we still have tens of thousands of good, moderate terrorists with their light weapons, long beards, black banners, and white helmets. Whoever wants to adopt them, please submit an application to their operators. They're ready. They're ready to be adopted. They can go to the West, they can go to Europe as refugees. In conclusion, Mr. President, the Syrian Arab Republic stresses once again that it does not possess any chemical weapons of any type, including chlorine, and we condemn once again the use of chemical weapons at any time and anywhere and under any circumstances. My country, Syria, stresses its unlimited cooperation with the OPCW to fulfill the commitments stated in the Convention on the Prohibition of the Development, Production, Stockpiling and Use of Chemical Weapons. The Russian Center for Reconciliation in Syria announced today that military experts has carried out investigations in Douma, and these investigations suggest that there are no signs of the use of chemical weapons there. And while treating the sick that are being treated in the hospitals of Douma, Russian doctors have proven that these patients have not been subjected to any chemical substance. So what we're witnessing here is really a Hollywood scene. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for